Hello and welcome to CEC Gurukul online lectures. I'll be continuing with the series on recombinant DNA technology and we will be discussing further on transformation. The specific learning objectives for today's session would be to understand introduction of phage DNA into bacterial cells, to understand the introduction of DNA into non-bacterial cells, in which primarily we will be talking about the introduction of DNA into yeast cells and the introduction of DNA into other eukaryotic cells. The reference used for this lecture is T.A. Brown, Gene Cloning and DNA Analysis and Introduction by T.A. Brown. So, reviewing what we mean by transportation into a host cell is the mechanism of introduction of recombinant DNA into the host cell for molecular cloning. And this procedure is termed as the transformation. And the term transformation is usually used for the introduction of DNA into the bacterial cells. Most species of bacteria, as we discussed in our last lecture, can take up DNA molecules from the medium. However, this natural take-up of the DNA from the surrounding medium is very less efficient. Not all the species of the bacteria are equally efficient at the DNA uptake. And this natural ability of bacteria to take up DNA molecule from its surroundings is termed as competence. So competence does exist in bacteria in natural conditions, but the efficiency is low. But for in vitro genetic manipulation, we can increase this efficiency by making the bacteria undergo various chemical treatments. The natural competence is low and transformation is probably not a major process by which the bacteria obtain the genetic information. And we again discussed last time that by physical or chemical treatments, the bacterial species can be made competent and to transform efficiently. We discussed about the introduction of primarily the plasmid DNA or the plasmid vectors or the recombinant plasmid vectors, that is carrying a gene of interest into the bacterial cells. Today we will be discussing about the introduction of phage DNA. If you remember, then we can while doing the cloning vectors, we also talked about a lot of phage vectors where the gene of interest or the DNA fragments of interest can be cloned. The capacity of the phage vector, so we talked about the M13 phage vector, which is generally used for creating single-stranded DNA molecules. We also talked about the lambda phage vectors, in which again the gene of interest or the DNA fragment of interest can be cloned into the phage DNA and then introduced into the bacteria for molecular cloning. So today we will talk about the different methods used to introduce this phage DNA or phage DNA vectors or recombinant phage DNA molecules into the bacterial cells. This transformation method is known as the transfection. So the introduction of phage DNA into bacterial cells is termed as transfection. It is equivalent to transformation. The only difference is that phage DNA rather than the plasmid DNA is involved. The purified phage DNA, as I said, or recombinant phage DNA. So by recombinant phage DNA, I mean the gene of interest or DNA fragment of interest cloned into the phage DNA is mixed with the competent E. coli cells, just like we studied about the plasmid DNA to be mixed with E. coli competent cells. And then DNA uptake is induced either by the heat shock method, where the difference in the temperature was created and therefore the transient pores open and take up the plasmid DNA, or by electric impulse, giving an electric pulse, which is basically termed as the electroporation method. So again, transfection can be attained by using the phage DNA, mixing it with the E. coli competent cells, that the cells which are made competent to take up the DNA efficiently from the surrounding medium, and then either giving a heat shock treatment or by the electroporation method. So it is quite equivalent to the transformation, but instead of the normal plasmid DNA or recombinant plasmid DNA, we use phage DNA to introduce. Before I elaborate further on this method, I would just like to introduce review two more terms which are used, according to this. So we are introducing the phage DNA into the E. coli cells. But the phage DNA is also introduced into the E. coli cells by the natural phenomena. And that natural phenomena by which the bacteriophages attaches themselves to E. coli and injects its own DNA into the bacterial cells is termed as transduction. So there is a difference. The transduction is the process by which a virus or a phage transfers the genetic material into a bacterium. So this is a natural phenomena. Then I would also again like to emphasize here that there is another term which is again called as transfection, but it is a different procedure, and that transfection refers to the introduction of any nucleic acid molecule, DNA, RNA or oligonucleotides by non-viral means into cultural eukaryotic cells. So it is a lab technique. So transfection in terms of the bacterial cells and transfection in terms of the eukaryotic cells. So these two terms are, same terms are used, but the procedures are different. So one is for the introduction of phage DNA into the bacterial cells, and transfection is also termed the introduction of DNA molecules into the eukaryotic cultured cells. Now, bacterial transfection is the standard method for introducing the double-stranded replicative form of an M13 cloning vector into E. coli. So we discussed about the M13 cloning vectors and lambda cloning vectors. So for M13 cloning vectors, the transfection is the normal process by which the replicative form, the double-stranded replicative form is introduced into the E. coli cells. The RF of an M13 phage can be manipulated and purified, and just like a plasmid. So, the double-stranded RF form can be used to clone the gene of interest just like we would use a plasmid DNA. The important point to remember in this is that when this M13 carrying vector is introduced into the E. coli, then by undergoing the open circle replication, it tends to form the single-stranded DNA. So M13 vectors are generally used for creating single-stranded DNA molecules, and these single-stranded DNA molecules we utilize for DNA sequencing processes, etc., the downstream applications. The recombinant double-stranded M13 RF can then be introduced into the E. coli cells, as I said, by heat shock or electroporation, just like the recombinant plasmids. So the M13 vectors are basically introduced in the similar manner as the plasmids. The only difference is that they are phage-based vectors. Now, talking about the lambda phage vectors, they do not transfect into the E. coli cells very efficiently. So another method is used which is termed as in vitro packaging. So what this in vitro packaging involves is that the recombinant lambda molecules are packaged into their lambda head and tail structures in the test tube. So as the name suggests, in vitro means doing it in the test tube, and packaging basically means that you have the lambda phage DNA. So when a bacteriophage, reviewing the mechanism of or the life cycle of a bacteriophage. So bacteriophage attaches itself onto the bacteria, injects its DNA into the bacterial cell, and then there the bacteria replicates and make use of the host proteins also. And then, all the viral capsid proteins or the protein coat, all those are formed. So the DNA keeps on replicating, and then the viral proteins are also formed. And eventually, if it is a lytic phage cycle, then the assembly takes place and the E. coli host is lysed and the more bacteriophage particles are released. So that is the normal cycle. So, but in that case, what happens is that the lambda DNA which is injected into the E. coli cells and the proteins which are formed, they are assembled inside the inside the E. coli cells to form the mature virus particles, which then lyse the cells and are released into the environment to infect more E. coli cells. We are carrying out this process of packaging in the test tube. So you will need the viral DNA, the lambda phage DNA, or the lambda phage DNA carrying our DNA fragment or gene of interest. You will be needing all the proteins which are required, and then you package these lambda DNA into the head, the viral head and proteins in vitro, and then introduce it into the E. coli. So that's the basic concept of the in vitro packaging. The culture cells are infected with then mature lambda phage particles. The packaging requires number of different proteins coded by the lambda genome, and these are prepared at high concentrations from cells infected with the defective lambda phage strains. Now, as I said, you will be needing the lambda DNA. containing a DNA fragment or gene of interest, but you will be also needing the phage protein. So now where to get these phage proteins from? So these phage proteins are coded by the lambda genome, and these are prepared at high concentrations from the cells infected with defective lambda phage strains. So there are two different systems that are in use. A single strain packaging system, which is basically that you have a single strain. For example, it is shown here that there is an E. coli SMR10 and it is basically lacking, it is defective in the COS sites. So again, if you remember that on the lambda genome, there are certain sites, the COS sites, which are very important for the formation of for the catenation of the DNA, which is later on resolved by cutting at these COS sites. The nucleases act on these COS sites, and then these protein molecules are also generated, and then the packaging takes place. That is how it is happening in the in vivo. So we have this DNA which will basically defective in these COS sites, and therefore the catenations will not be resolved and the mature virus particles will not be formed. However, it does not stop the viral proteins to be expressed. So the accumulation of viral proteins will increase. So we will have a strain which is defective, and we can then purify the viral proteins from this strain and use it for the in vitro packaging. So the defective lambda DNA carries mutation in the COS sites, which is responsible for the cleaving of the lambda catenanes. And therefore no replication of the DNA will occur, and therefore no mature phage particles will be formed. However, as I said, the viral proteins will be expressed. Another system which is used is termed as the two-strain packaging system, where two defective lambda strains are used, one having mutation in a gene for one of the components of the code protein and other having mutation in another gene for another component of the code protein. Neither strain, however, is able to complete the infection cycle, though products of all other components than that of the mutated gene are produced. So instead of using one gene, we use two genes where the component of one protein or the component of another protein is basically defective. When we mix these two cultures, we will have a complete set of viral proteins, and therefore, we can either use the lysed cultures of these, or we can purify the complete set of proteins from the two defective strains and then use it for the in vitro packaging. The combined lysates of two culture of cells, one infected with one defective strain and the other with other defective strain, contains all the necessary components for the in vitro packaging. Now, in vitro packaging in both the systems occur automatically by just mixing the lambda DNA with the packaging proteins. So for the in vitro packaging, all you need is the lambda DNA carrying our gene, or lambda DNA vectors carrying our gene of interest or our DNA fragment, and the viral proteins. And when you just mix them together, they tend to assemble into the the packaging basically occurs into the protein. So this is again shown here. So you have the lambda DNA catenanes. Now this will carry your gene of interest, and if you add them with the lambda proteins, then the mature phage particles are formed. So this is basically the in vitro packaging. Now when you have these assembled phage particles which are carrying your gene of interest, then they can be added to the bacterial cultures, and normal lambda infective process is allowed to take place. So normal infection will take place, it will go into and therefore cause the molecular cloning of the gene of interest which is carried by the lambda DNA. How do you visualize the phage infection? So the visualization of phage infection is basically as plaques on the bacterial lawn. So when you infect the bacteria, then you plate it on a suitable medium containing again the antibiotic resistance. We had already discussed this again in the cloning vector lectures, where we talk about the different types of cloning vectors. We also talked about the selection of the vectors as well as the selection of the recombinant vectors. So just to review a little bit, we get these kind of plaques, and these plaques, these empty regions will contain the concentration of bacteriophages, because these bacteriophages are infecting the bacteria, causing them to lyse, and then again attacking the neighboring bacteria and lysing them. So creating a kind of an empty region on the otherwise bacterial lawn on the plate. Each plaque is a zone of clearing produced as the phage lyse the cells and move on to infect and eventually lyse the neighboring bacteria. Now there is a difference between the plaques obtained for the M13 vector and for the lambda-phage vectors, but still you can easily make out a clearer zone. Lambda-phage vectors are completely clear. However, the M13, because it does not cause the lysis of the cell, but it slows down the growth of the bacteria in which it is introduced. Therefore, you will have still a clearer zone or still a less turbid zone than the surrounding area, because the bacterial cells will be growing slowly in those regions where the M13 vector has been infected. So this is how you visualize this thing. So we have talked about the introduction of DNA or the transformation method into the bacterial cells of the plasmids basically in the last lecture, and in up till now we have discussed about the introduction of phage DNA into the bacterial cells. But not necessarily only the bacterial cells are used as hosts for molecular cloning. Sometimes we do need other, or the requirement is to clone and the gene of interest into other cells such as the yeast cells or the eukaryotic cells. So let's look at the way the DNA or the recombinant DNA and the other vectors are introduced into these cells. So coming on to the introduction of DNA into non-bacterial but individual cells, that is in vitro we are talking about. So first we will talk about the transformation of the yeast cells. We talked about the yeast cloning vectors again in our lecture on cloning vectors, that there are some special yeast cloning vectors and yeast artificial chromosomes which are used to introduce the DNA into the yeast cells. Saccharomyces cerevisiae is a simple model organism. Saccharomyces cerevisiae, it's the normal baker's yeast. It is the simplest model organism for the eukaryotic studies, and therefore for carrying out the genetic manipulation or for carrying out the expression of certain genes in this system, we need to introduce the recombinant plasmids into the yeast cells. Now, several procedures to transform yeast has been used, such as the spiroplast method, the lithium acetate mediated method, electroporation method, glass bead method, and the biolistic method. So let's take up these methods one by one. The first is the spiroplast method. Now, spiroplast, as you know now, the difference between a bacterial cell and a eukaryotic cell would be that its plasma membrane is also very harsh. For example, in yeast cell, there is a cell wall that needs to be get ridden of also, or the introduction of DNA needs to pass through not only just the plasma membrane but also the cell wall structure. So the spiroplasts are prepared by treating the yeast cells with certain enzymes that removes this cell wall. So once the cell wall is removed, it is easier to introduce any exogenous DNA or foreign DNA into the yeast cells. So that is the first thing which is done, that the cell wall lytic enzymes are used to remove the outer membrane, outer cell wall from the intact yeast cells. And then they will, take up a circular kind of a shape, and those are termed as spiroplast. So in the spiroplast, it is again now, if these spiroplasts are incubated with the plasmid DNA, the yeast vectors or, the recombinant yeast cloning vectors, then when we just incubate them together and we use certain chemicals that condense these vectors onto the spiroplast cells, they can be introduced just like that. So if we use calcium phosphate, or we will talk about this polyethanolamine, the PEG glycol, these are the condensed, they call the condensation of the DNA onto the yeast cells, and therefore it will be easily taken up by the yeast cells. So they just get into it and make it a transformed cell, and gradually when it is grown in a suitable medium, then the cell wall will be regained, and again you have a intact yeast cell, but now it is a transformed yeast cell because now it carries the exogenous plasmid. So this is the spiroplast method of introduction, and as you can see, this is a plate showing the growth of the transformants which is onto the medium. Now, one important aspect is that we are discussing about the general concepts about these methods. The specificity of these methods or the protocols, the exact protocols vary, because when our idea, the medium will vary when it is a bacterial cell or a yeast cell. The medium will vary, the enzymes might vary, the condensation molecules are usually similar, but they have tried and tested that some give more efficiency, some give less efficiency. Then there are certain supportive chemicals are also, for example, during yeast transformation method, sorbitol act as a very supportive material which needs to be used. So, there are variations on the specific protocols which are used, but we are talking about the conceptual methods here. So, this is the spiroplast method. The advantage of the spiroplast method is that it gives a very high transformation efficiency, and it is useful for transformation with yeast artificial chromosomes having a length of 100 to 1000 kb and with the infectious prion particles. But it is not that much utilized because it is a tedious and a complex procedure, and the transformants, when you want to revive the transformants, that they are embedded in the regeneration agar and therefore hindering the replica plating. So again, we have already discussed about what is this replica plating, because then we need to select the yeast cells which contain the gene of interest or the plasma or the vector, the yeast vector, and therefore we need to do sometimes the replica plating so as to identify that particular cell. But because they are embedded inside the regeneration agar, it is difficult to make that. So spiroplast is a very efficient method, but because of certain drawbacks, it is not a very it is used at some places but not for all. Other, which is a commonly used chemical method, is a lithium acetate mediated method. In this method, the positively charged lithium cations neutralize the charges on the cell membrane and the plasmid DNA. So as it is shown here, this is a yeast cell, it is a budding yeast cell, and these are the yeast cloning vectors. Probably it is carrying the gene of interest or the DNA fragment of interest. And when you add the lithium acetate, then the lithium basically surrounds both the lithium cations surrounds both the vector as well as the cell membrane of the yeast, therefore neutralizing the negative charges of both. And then when the single strand DNA, then the single strand DNA is also used. When the single strand DNA is used, then the single strand DNA sits on the neutralized cell membrane, and it will sit on the neutralized cell membrane and facilitate the introduction of the plasmid DNA inside it. So this will just sit onto the membrane as it is shown here, and it will make the way for the this positively surrounded by positive lithium cations. So lithium cations are not shown in these figures, but which was shown in the previous step, but now they are positively charged, and then single strand DNA will just cover these things and make a path for this to be introduced. Then when we apply such as the heat shock, when you raise the temperature, it will create transient pores, and the vector DNA is introduced, which is lying in the vicinity, is introduced inside the into the cell. And when again you lower down the temperature, when the temperature is lower down, then the cell wall, the cell wall is basically it regains its structure and therefore closes, and therefore and then you go for the regeneration method. So this is how the lithium acetate facilitates the introduction of yeast vectors into the yeast Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Other methods, the physical methods, is an electroporation. I am not elaborating on electroporation here. Again, the conditions and chemical treatments would be different, but the electroporation basic concept remains the same, that the transformation is mediated by a high electric pulse. The transfer efficiency of around 2 to 5 into 10 raised to the power of 5 transformants per microgram of the plasmid DNA or the yeast vector DNA is basically attained by this electroporation method. Another method which is used for introduction of DNA into the yeast cell is the glass bead method. In this, intact Saccharomyces cerevisiae cells can be transformed by agitation with glass beads in the presence of carrier DNA and the DNA, the plasmid DNA or the vector DNA, at very low efficiency, that is about 300 transformants per microgram of plasmid DNA. So this is one of the method also sometimes used, although it gives low transformation efficiency, but it does give the another method to introduce the DNA into the yeast cells. Another method to introduce, which is very prevalent, is termed as the biolistic method. Now, biolistic method was first used to introduce the DNA into the plant cells, as we will see down the lane, but it is also used for introducing the DNA into the yeast cells. The yeast cells are transformed with DNA-coated metal microprojectiles that are shot into the cells. Biolistic basically means bombardment. So in this, the DNA is immobilized. The DNA basically means the vector DNA or the recombinant vector DNA carrying of a gene of interest or the DNA fragment of interest is immobilized on the particles such as microprojectiles and recently onto the nanoparticles also. So the technique has advanced and even nanoparticles are used to immobilize the DNA, and then they are bombarded onto the cell, and that gets introduced the DNA into the cells. So it gets associated with the cells and then are taken up by the cells. So this is shown here. So this is a simple called as gene gun also, or a biolistic equipment, which is shown here. So as you can see, it will have a central tube where the gas is basically high escalated, and then you have a rupture disc, then you have a projectile. The projectiles are here, then this is a stop screen, and then you have a Petri plate which is containing your target yeast cells. So when a high pressure helium gas is blown through this tube, then it ruptures the rupture screen and hits the this platform containing the microprojectiles. So this platform moves from here, the DNA coated particles, and then they are the screen is stopped by the stop screen and the particles are bombarded onto the intact cells. So this is how the biolistic method runs. Among the metals tested, tungsten is the most effective for introduction of DNA into the yeast cells. Stable nuclear transforms result primarily from the penetration of a single particle with a diameter of 0.5 to 0.65 micrometer. So if a single particle enters into the yeast cell, the stable nuclear transformants can appear. But apart from the nuclear transformants, and the efficiency is a little lower in this biolistic method. So the optimal conditions and yield only about 500 transformants per microgram of plasmid DNA when used 10 raised to the power of 8 yeast cells. But this is the only suitable method and one successful method for the mitochondrial transformation. So sometimes we need to introduce the DNA into the nucleus of the eukaryotic cells, but sometimes for our studies we want to introduce the DNA into the mitochondria of the cells. So mitochondrial transformants, this is a very successful method and used for introduction of DNA into the yeast mitochondria for various studies. So next comes is when we talk about the introduction of DNA into other eukaryotic cells. So we have talked about the introduction of DNA into bacterial cells. We have talked about the introduction of DNA into the yeast cells. Now further we go into the introduction of DNA into the other eukaryotic cells such as the animal cells or the plant cells, which are grown as cell culture in the laboratories. Again, I talked about when I started this lecture about the term transfection. So transfection was used for the introduction of phage DNA into the bacterial cells, but transfection is also used for the introduction of DNA by non-viral means into the cultured eukaryotic cells. No single transfection reagent or method works for all the cell types. The standardizations have been done, studies have been done, and many transfection chemicals have been zeroed down using different optimal conditions for the introduction of exogenous DNA into the animal or the plant cells basically. These methods can generally be segregated into two main groups. One is a chemical transfection and another is a physical transfection. So what happens in the chemical transfection? They include approaches such as lipid-based approaches, calcium phosphate mediated transfection, and the use of cationic polymers, etc. All make use of positively charged carrier molecules that complex with the nucleic acids to package them for the cellular delivery. So we will talk about some of these chemical transfection methods in which these cationic molecules or positively charged carrier molecules will surround the DNA as well as the cell to neutralize the negative charge on the exogenous DNA as well as the plasma membrane and facilitate the delivery. By overcoming the negative charge of the cell membrane barrier, they pass through the membrane to deliver their contents. So lipid-based methods or lipid transfection make use of these liposomes. These are double-layered liposomes. As you can see, these cationic biolipids, they form such liposomes, and when the DNA is introduced into it, it traps the DNA. So this becomes the transformation or the transfection complex, and this transfection complex is then associated with the cells in which the DNA needs to be introduced. So this is the lipid transfection method. Calcium phosphate method, the calcium ions, again, they are divalent cations. They basically surround the DNA, neutralizing its negative charge. Cationic polymers such as polyethanolamine or PEG are also used, which cause the condensation of the DNA molecules, and then these condensed DNA molecules can also be transported or transfected into the eukaryotic cells, the mammalian cells or animal cells or plant cells. So these are some of the methods, the chemical transformation methods which are used. Once these particles are created, then the next step is the attachment of these positively charged complexes to the negatively charged cell membrane through simple electrostatic attractions. So what happened here is, then when it is introduced here, then these cationic lipids are basically surrounding the DNA or the vector, and they are not surrounding the cell membrane. So cell membrane is still negatively charged. Same is present here. When you add the calcium phosphate medium, then if you are adding this calcium phosphate treatment separately to the DNA and not to the cells, when they are separate, then this calcium will associate only with the DNA and the cell membrane will still be negative. So you have a positively surrounded by a positive charged DNA molecule and a negatively charged the cell membrane of the eukaryotic cell. So they get attracted by only the electrostatic attraction, and then the complex enters into the cell via the endocytosis, a process by which the molecules enter the cell via membrane-bound vesicles which are called as the endosome. So this is a natural phenomena. Through this endocytic pathway, these complexes will be taken in, and then this endosomes will release the DNA. The mechanism is not yet clearly known, but will release the DNA, and finally these transfected DNA will exist inside the eukaryotic cell. It can exist either stably or transiently. By stable transfection, we means that the gene of interest or the DNA that you have introduced into the cells will combine with the genome of the cells where it is entered, and therefore when these cells will multiply, you will have them, the gene of interest that you have added will stably reside in all the daughter cells. Transient transfection is when the introduced DNA does not incorporate into the genome, and therefore its expression will be only for 48 to 96 hours. So that is termed as the transient transfection. Now this efficiency of these DNA transfection is typically measured through the reporter systems that are tethered to the inserted genes. We have been seeing that whenever we are introducing the plasmid vectors or recombinant Phage DNA into the host cells, then we need to develop a system by which we can select the cells where the vector has been introduced or where the recombinant vectors has been introduced. For the eukaryotic cells, the system is basically the reporter system. So if the gene has been introduced and gene is going to either stably transfect or even transiently transfect, it is going to produce something that is going to report that the cells have been transfected. So for that system, we have two of the things I just mentioned here, that this can be easily detected by directly observing the reporter protein itself. For example, in the case of green fluorescent protein, so these green fluorescent, these tags are tethered onto the gene of interest that needs to be inserted. So the green fluorescent proteins will produce a kind of a fluorescence which can be easily measured, or by measuring its enzymatic activity. For example, luciferase enzyme is also used for tethering onto the gene of the interest. So this luciferase will give a, you can assess the enzymatic activity of luciferase enzyme by using a colorimetric assay, and therefore it is a luciferase enzyme reporter system. The stable DNA transfection is best measured by the genomic analysis also, such as using the RT-PCR, and we will again elaborate more on these techniques in our subsequent lectures. The last point here is that not only chemical transfection but physical transfection is also used to introduce the DNA into the eukaryotic cells. Electroporation and biolistic particle delivery methods we have already discussed for doing it in the bacterial cells and the yeast cells, and therefore I am not elaborating the concept again. It is a similar concept. Again, the chemical treatments would be different, but the electric pulse and the gene bombardment method, the immobilization of the DNA onto the microprojectiles and then bombarding it onto the cell. So the concept remains the same. One method which we have not discussed, which I just introduced here, is the microinjection method. So microinjection method makes use of a very fine pipette to inject the DNA molecules directly into the nucleus of the cells to be transformed. We are only talking about the introduction of DNA into the eukaryotic individual cells here, which are cultured in vitro. We will talk about the introduction into the whole organisms later when we talk about the applications of biotechnology, basically the generation of transgenic animals, etc. So this microinjection method is a very widespread method employed to produce transgenic animals. But it can also be used for producing the transformed cells in the cell culture. So what it basically does is that you have the cultured cells and you use a micropipette to introduce the recombinant DNA directly into the nucleus of these cells, and then you can revive these cells, grow these cells, and study these cells for the introduction of the DNA. Again, the detection method can be based upon the various reporter systems which are already tagged next to the gene of interest or the DNA fragment of interest, which we are introducing into the eukaryotic cells. So by this we have talked about the various transformation techniques or the introduction of DNA techniques into the bacterial cells, yeast cells, and eukaryotic individual cells or the cultured in vitro cells. We will talk about the other methods and we will talk about the later. Thank you.